So good afternoon, everyone. So a very warm welcome to you all from the sunny southeast. So I hope everyone is keeping safe and well today, and also a very warm welcome to our speaker, Eddie Taaffe. So my name is Colin Callery. I'm chair of the Southeast Region Committee of Engineers Ireland, and on behalf of the Southeast Region, I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar, Housing Delivery Co-ordination Office, assisting in delivering social and affordable housing. And we're delighted to have Eddie Taaffe with us. Eddie is a civil engineer, a chartered engineer, and a fellow of Engineers Ireland. Eddie was appointed as programme coordinator with the Lgma Housing Delivery Co-ordination Office last year. And Eddie was previously a director of service with Wexford County Council, overseeing Wexford's special projects programme, and also worked as a director of service in South Dublin County Council. So in his 25-year local authority career, Eddie has worked in planning, housing, roads, water services, and infrastructure delivery roles. So the format today is Eddie's going to present for 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes Q&A at the end. So you can type your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And as time permits, we'll get through as many questions as we can. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Eddie. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you to Engineers Ireland and the South East Region for this opportunity to present the work of the Housing Delivery Co-ordination Office. I have a presentation, and I shall share that now. I suppose at the outset, what I should say is that I'm conscious that a lot of the members wouldn't be directly familiar with housing or local authorities or both. So apologies to those members who are very familiar with both of those aspects, and they mightn't learn anything new today, but I suppose I have to tailor it for both. And I've tried to keep it, I suppose, reasonably housing specific, but also explaining some of the concepts of how the local authority system works. So first of all, I suppose I should start out by saying, what is a local government management agency? I'll deal with that. I'll also deal with, in broad terms, housing delivery in Ireland, and then delve into a little bit more detail on the role of the HDCO. Also, I'll touch on the new housing multi-annual programme that the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage are working on, called Housing for All. I'll address some of the challenges that face the sector in delivering social and affordable housing, and maybe some thought-provoking ideas at the end, which would probably be more my own personal ideas and thoughts when it comes to housing delivery. So first off, I suppose, what is the Lgma, for those who aren't familiar with it? The Lgma is an overarching body, local government management agency, that supports local authorities in its work. It's funded by the local authority sector, and it leads sectoral change and development across the 31 local authorities and the public service. And it helps to promote best practice and systems and address challenges that all local authorities face, so that local authorities aren't having to face a lot of these issues individually. How do we do that? As I say, a sectoral approach to service delivery, so that we have a common approach to issues and how each of the 31 local authorities delivers services. It represents the local authority sector in the overall wider range of how we interact with the broader public service and civil service, and how we address issues. We help the sector implement change, and the local authority sector, and I know I'd be a little bit biased because I worked in the local authority sector, I think we are quite good at changing. We're always changing. We're always looking to do different things, and it's a very flexible arm of the local authority, or sorry, of the public sector. And we're always looking to enhance our performance and measure our performance as well, and benchmark that and ensure that we are delivering value for money. So that's a bit about the Lgma. Okay, social and affordable housing. Who delivers what in Ireland? Well, there's three main delivery, I suppose, bodies. There's the local authorities themselves, and we build, buy and lease property. So the three ways of delivering new houses is those ways. We build them, we buy them, and we lease them. And when I mean lease, it's generally long-term lease, 20 to 25 years. Approved housing bodies are also a major element of delivery, And they are non-profit agencies set up to buy and manage social housing, and they are funded by the state with agreed funding models. And then there's the Land Development Agency, which is a new agency, a semi-state body effectively, and there's been a bit of media attention about that because the legislation around the Land Development Agency is going through the door at the moment. So they're a new body set up to deliver social and affordable housing on the larger urban sites in the main cities, and also to look at development strategies for wider public sector land, not just local authority land, but for example, land that might be surplus to requirements for the HSE or the Defence Forces or the various other government bodies. So there are sectors set up specifically to deliver on the larger urban sites. So they're the three main delivery agencies, but by and large, it's the local authorities and the approved housing bodies are the main delivery agents, and the Land Developing Agency will have a growing role over the next few years. Okay, to focus on local authority housing delivery, how do we deliver houses? Number of different ways. Straightforward, employer designed. What I mean by that is local authority owns the land, local authority retains a design team, designs them, gets planning, employs a contractor, builds the houses. Straightforward, employer designed. I suppose a subset of that is design and build, where we get the planning, and the preliminary design, and then we go out to design and build. Turnkey development, for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that is effectively we enter an agreement with a private developer to buy either an entire development or a chunk of a development of houses and buy them. It's effectively an acquisition where we might buy 10 houses at an agreed price and an agreed schedule of delivery. That's a significant element of the way we deliver houses. Buy and renew is a new area and a growing area whereby we buy old property that's either derelict or vacant, and we renovate it and we bring it back into life. And that's a particularly important role that local authorities undertake, because as we all know, we do have a lot of dereliction and vacant property in our towns and villages. Other areas where we deliver housing is a system called competitive dialogue, and Cork City Council and Donegal County Council use this in particular and have a very developed system of delivering housing using competitive dialogue. And that's where they enter into a dialogue, as it says, with developers who have land and who can develop bespoke schemes by agreement with the local authority, and there's a negotiated process, and that's working very well for those two authorities. And then in the larger authorities, we have joint venture systems whereby we deliver mixed tenure schemes, which would be a mixture of social, private, and affordable housing, where the local authority would own the land, but they enter into a joint venture with a property developer or a consortium to deliver on these deliverables in terms of planning and financing and the houses over a period of time. And they are generally used for large sites. And for example, one site that would have been in the media lately was the Oscar Traynor site in Dublin City Council. That would have been that type of large urban site with a mixed tenure development on it. As with all capital investment processes or capital expenditure processes in the public or civil service, there's governance around it. And the governance is in line with the public spending code. And I suppose there has been media attention about the level of, for want of a better term, bureaucracy around how local authorities deliver housing. But the important thing to remember is that this is public taxpayers' money we are spending. And all expenditure of taxpayers' money requires a level of governance that's proportionate or appropriate to the level of the investment. And given that public housing investment is somewhere of the order of €1 billion a year, it requires a significant level of governance. So there's a 4-stage process or 4 gates that a local authority has to go through to get a housing scheme delivered. And these are anybody who's involved in capital planning, these would be self-evident. 4 stages: approval in principle, pre-statutory planning and approval, pre-tender approval, and approval to award a contract. So there's a lot of, I suppose, media attention on that. But I would be very interested in anybody who has a better idea or a better way that that could be done, or if that's not appropriate to the level of investment, I'd like to see somebody else's suggestion on it, because we do need proper approvals and proper governance around the spending of public money. The Minister for Housing, Minister O'Brien, recently changed the single stage approval. So for projects under €6 million in value, there's only one stage approval that the local authority requires to get from the Department of Housing. But I suppose the quid pro quo on it is that any overspends on that the local authority is liable for those overspends over and above the €6 million. But we will see more projects delivered under that single stage approval process. So what's the role of the HDCO in all this? Well, as I mentioned, we have 31 local authorities. We act as the liaison between the 31 local authorities and the County and City Managers Association and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. The County and City Managers Association is the body of, obviously, county and city managers, or chief executives as they're known now, who set policy and guide the overall direction of local authority activity in conjunction with the Department of Housing. So we act as that liaison between the 31 and the overarching bodies. And similarly, we feed back the department's views and requirements back to the local authorities. So it's a two-way process with the local authority, or with the HDCO in the middle. So more specifically, the HDCO, we prepare monthly updates on delivery and activity and projections on housing delivery to the Minister and to the CCMA. A lot of our resources, and bear in mind we're a small team, we're only myself and 4 others at the moment. A major part of our role is collecting real-time data on housing projects, and at any one time there are literally thousands of units, thousands of dwellings in a pipeline or on site that involve hundreds and hundreds of projects. So that's a significant amount of work, is just collecting data, and I'll show you some information on that later. We engage and represent the sector with all stakeholders. For example, that would be other arms of the state, but it would also be other external bodies like the LDA, the Irish Water, and the ESB. As I said, we streamline interactions with utilities, and we've established very, very good working relationships and very good contacts with both Irish Water and ESB. And I think that part of what we do is working very, very well. And we establish and develop best practice. There are some excellent examples of best practice going on around the country in the 31 authorities. But one thing the local authority sector is probably needs to improve on is how we spread the word, the good word on what we do around the 31 authorities, and avoid reinventing the wheel. And that's one of the areas that the HDCO has been designed to tackle and to spread that best practice so that people can avail of that in as far as possible. Just to give you, and I won't touch on this in too much detail, this is our work program for, well, this is slightly out of date, it's 2020 and 2021, it has been updated lately, but it'll give you an idea of the type of activities we're involved in. I won't spend too much time on this. The first one there obviously is the real-time accurate data on all projects and activities. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. We faster and more efficient procurement. Procurement is a major element of what we do and requires major staff resources, and any efficiencies that we can bring to bear on that are very welcome. Consistent application of project management practices. We do suffer from not having a single agreed project management guideline for housing delivery, but that's something we're working on with the department, and we should have that situation largely resolved in the coming months. Meaningful and productive engagement with stakeholders. I've touched on that before, and we have high-level interaction groups and points of contact with all the main stakeholders. We're doing a lot of work on the remaining supply of service land, and land is the fundamental building block of housing delivery. And we need to get to grips with what our pipeline of land is, and are there any constraints coming up in the availability of land, which there are, but we need to quantify that because of the amount of investment required. We will shortly be looking at new models for delivery of affordable housing. There's a huge emphasis by government on affordable housing delivery and how that can be delivered alongside social housing, and in particular through the use of mixed tenure schemes where you have a housing development with a mixture of social and affordable housing. The next point, develop and pilot new housing solutions. That's, I suppose, best practice and innovation, which is obviously an ongoing job of work for us to do. One of the last areas we've to get involved in is the public spending code requires quite comprehensive cost effectiveness analysis, depending on the size of the project and the stage you're at in the project. And that could be quite tricky and quite time consuming. And it's our job to make sure that the development of those reports and that cost effectiveness analysis process doesn't delay things too long. The last one is just about turnkeys. I won't touch on that too much. Priority items for us. The land bank I've mentioned. We need to get back into the land buying process across all local authorities because we are coming to the end of our available land, which we've been using up over the last few years. We need faster procurement. We need to use design and build more. We need to use more innovative processes. Procurement takes a long time in the public sector and savings there need to be made. Third point is local authority capacity. During the crash, local authority staff numbers were effectively decimated. We lost a third of our staff and we lost a huge amount of corporate knowledge and corporate skill sets. So we need to build back up our teams, and in particular, experienced engineering staff and experienced architectural staff. One area we are quite poor on and we have a deficit in is quantity surveyors. QSs are absolutely vital in housing delivery in my mind, yet very few local authorities employ them. We also need tailored program management to refresh ourselves on the importance of program management and how that relates to housing delivery in particular. Just a little bit on the new multi-annual program. It seems to me that over the last few years, every 6 months, there would be some new lobby group saying how many houses we needed in the country. And it seemed to be a form of nearly an auction that somebody would say 40,000 and then somebody else would say 50,000. But I think this debate has been put to bed once and for all. The ESRI have developed a model and it's an evidence-based model using a Scottish organization, a Scottish public body that developed and proofed models for assessing housing demand. So the figure is now 33,000 dwellings on average per year for the next 10 years, is now the official government figure, and it's backed by science effectively. That 33,000 is broken down into about 11,000 social rent, social housing. The estimate is about 4,000 houses will be for people who have an affordability constraint. And what that means is people who can't afford to either buy or rent in their preferred area where they need to live. The private rental market is somewhere just over 6,000. And then the private sector, as we know it, private built, private purchased, is somewhere under 12,000. So you can see that the state has a role in the top two there in somewhere between around 40–50% of housing will either be state subsidized in the form of a social house or in the form of an affordable purchase or an affordable rental property. That's quite significant in European terms, but that's what we're working to now. And there is a deficit. There's 60-odd thousand people around the country on the social housing waiting list, and there's a significant cohort more getting effectively state assistance to allow them rent in the private sector. So that's the numbers, and that's what we have to deliver. And that full, just to explain, in 2020, on the build front, between local authorities and AHBs, we built 5,000 houses, and that's made up of 2,200 built by local authorities, 2,100 built by AHBs, and 742 provided under Part 5 from planning developments. The remainder, up to bring us up to about 8,000 was lease and acquisition. So the new build is about 5,000, and that was down on projected numbers because of the COVID suspensions earlier in the year. So the challenge is, under the new Housing for All programme, we need to significantly ramp up new build projects. And what I mean by new build is what we call SHIP projects, which stands for Social Housing Investment Programme. So that is local authority built on local authority land funded by the state. And the target for that will be, and it's in the programme for government, is 10,000 units a year for 5 years, starting this year. So that's 50,000 over the next 5 years social housing, with affordable on top of that and leasing on top of that again. We need to deliver affordable housing as well. We probably need to reduce, to a certain extent, the reliance on turnkeys and enhance our own employer designed or design and build schemes on local authority land. We also need to use this investment to tackle urban dereliction and town centre depopulation. So we are talking about more brownfield and infill development within our existing urban fabrics. We also need more one beds. A significant portion of the social housing waiting list is for those people who their housing need can be met by a one bedroom unit. And obviously the challenge, as mentioned earlier, is land. Land needs to be serviced and it needs to be in suitable locations. And that is a very significant challenge. Just a little bit on data collection. Because the programme is spread across 31 local authorities and involves thousands of projects at various stages, data collection is a major issue. At the moment, we're operating under an interim solution where each local authority fills in their data on a spreadsheet. We host that on SharePoint, and we've devised an interim solution to get us over the next couple of years, whereby we suck the information out of the Excel spreadsheets and we produce reports, which I'll show later. And I'd just like to acknowledge the work of my colleagues, and in particular Eileen Davis, our IT expert, who came up with a bespoke solution to actually suck information out of the disparate spreadsheets and produce excellent reports. But data is key, absolutely key to what we do. And projections in particular. The Minister and the government are acutely aware of the delivery pipeline and what it looks like and what impacts on it and what they can do to make sure that these targets are delivered. But more importantly, that they're done in a timely manner so that, that they can have the maximum impact. So there's there's a heightened concentration, or shall we say surveillance, of the local authority sector to make sure that we have all the tools necessary to us to deliver on the programme for government, because it is the #1 priority for this government, and I think second only maybe to climate change. So if you take climate change and housing, they are by far and away there's a huge amount of emphasis across the whole of government on those two areas. Best practice, I've touched on some of these already. We need to use design and build more. We need to use frameworks more. We need more urban brownfield development. The National Planning Framework sets minimum requirements on the amount of housing that will come from brownfield development, as opposed to perpetuating urban sprawl. We need more one-bed delivery. Nearly half of the social housing waiting list is for one-bed units only. We do need, as I mentioned earlier, project management guidelines, and that's in hand at the moment. Affordable housing is going to become a major issue, and the delivery of affordable housing over the next year or two is going to become a major challenge to local authorities, and how that model is delivered, because there's a lot of risks around affordable housing for the local authority sector. And obviously the major issue is aligning infrastructure investment, be that Irish Water or the NTA or ESB, etc., with housing provision. Just to touch on a few other areas that the HDCO operates. There's an energy retrofit program I mentioned earlier about the government's priority for climate change in general. The programme for government committed to retrofitting 500,000 houses across the state by 2030 to bring them up to a B2 building energy rating standard. So of that 500,000, 36,500 of those will be local authority houses. Now, we have been doing energy retrofitting work over the last number of years, but 2021 will be a year where this will really ramp up. So this year, the target is to do 2,400 houses, and that'll ramp up next year, and that program will get bigger and bigger as the years go by. So at the moment, the allocation, I think, is 45 million euro for this year. So that averages out as around 27,000 a dwelling. Some will obviously be more, some will be less. But what we're talking about is heat pumps, external insulation or cavity injection, if that's appropriate, and new windows and doors. So effectively what we're doing is we're taking relatively old housing stock and sealing the outside of it, making the outside envelope as energy and thermal efficient as possible, and then installing a heat pump. And that should get us to B2, or what we call cost optimal equivalent. And because that involves a significant number of houses and working on houses that are occupied, there's a lot of project management around that, and there's a lot of staff, local authority staff input into that to make that program happen and to keep it happening over the next number of years. The other area the HDCO is involved in is proactive housing stock management. There's 130,000 local authority social houses in the country, and that's growing obviously every year. But the maintenance practices across the 31 authorities vary quite widely. A mixture of reactive and proactive maintenance. And that is largely determined by the funding that's available to the local authority to actually maintain their houses. Some local authorities are only really in a position to fix it when it breaks. Some have a mixture because they have more funding available. And then the larger urban local authorities that would have a bigger funding base do have more proactive engagement. But it's really, in simplistic terms, it's moving as much as we can from fix it when it breaks to fix it just before it breaks. And that's something we need to be looking at and moving the sector over the next few years. We need a standardized assessment procedure and a database of our stock condition and the condition of our houses. And we need to agree and standardize the life cycle replacements for the main housing components. But obviously, to do all that, we need funding. And while we do have rental income from our social houses, I think there's a general acknowledgement that that will need to be topped up to allow us to put housing maintenance on the footing that it should be on, to make sure that our housing stock and our housing assets are kept in the condition that they should be. Some final thoughts, and these are more, I suppose, my own personal kind of thoughts on housing. I once worked in a town where I was responsible for traffic management, and my boss said to me that I was very fortunate to be working in a town where there was 20,000 experts on traffic management, and I was only one of the 20,000. But I think in Ireland, we sometimes probably do have maybe 4 million, 5 million experts on what's wrong with the housing market. But just a couple of considerations. I don't think we've, in my memory, we haven't had a proper functioning housing market. Certainly since the late 1990s. Up to 2009, we've built too many. Since 2009, we've built too few. To my mind, the key input to housing is land. We have underutilization of urban land in all our towns and villages and cities. Zoned, serviced land, and I suppose been deliberately controversial here, is that a public asset or a private asset? And that's a fundamental issue to housing, and controlling the development and the development pace and the costs around development on service land is key to a properly functioning housing market. If you look at other elements like construction costs, we have the hard costs, which are labor, materials, and building. And I don't see any great scope for any changes there. Material costs are what they are. We're a small market. Building standards, I don't think anybody's suggesting that we reduce building standards. We need to have NZ buildings. We need to have quality housing. Labour costs are what they are. We're a modern first world economy, and they're the labour costs we're going to have to pay. The soft costs around design and finance and infrastructure, they are what they are as well. So I don't see much scope for changing the cost, but I do see a fundamental issue around land and how we deal with land, and is it a public asset or a private asset? The planning system, there has to be a level of planning in the country. There has to be a demonstration that development complies with proper planning and sustainable development and complies with public policy. But the issue is, does the planning system as it operates deliver certainty for the development sector and for the investment sector? To my mind, it doesn't. It does when you're dealing with the local authority and you can meet the person who's going to be deciding your planning application and put your case to them in a pre-planning meeting. And then if you're not happy with what the decision they make, you can appeal that to an independent body. Where I think the system fails is in legal challenges. And because you didn't demonstrate compliance with some obscure section of an EU regulation, somebody can throw out your 2-year planning process. Because the reality of it is, if somebody wasn't satisfied with the decision either the local authority took or on board an audit took, so they went to the courts. And even if you win in the courts, the cost and the uncertainty and the delay is not delivering for the development sector. So they are my own kind of private thoughts on housing and the issues and the non-issues. I just finish on one point before I show you some of the data analysis. Last year in the Irish Times, in the business section, I read an article by an external expert, not by one of their journalists, but by a contributing expert who claimed that turnkeys were the solution to the housing crisis and to the social housing crisis, and why weren't local authorities using turnkeys, and if they used them, everything would be hunky-dory. 3 months later, I opened the same paper, and in the business edition, it was another expert was coming in and saying, local authorities should not be using turnkeys, they're over-relying on turnkeys and they're paying through the nose. So in the space of 3 months, you had completely divergent opinions on what the solution or the problem was in local authority housing. So that kind of gives you an idea of the challenge. That's me, Colin. If it's okay with you, I might just show you some of the data analytics just very quickly. And you might just
no problem. We're good for time anyway, Eddie.
Yeah, just to show you these are actually out of date because construction has only really started in the last couple of weeks. We're revising all our construction programs. So at the moment, I'll just show you some of these. We suck this data, as I say, and thanks to the team that work with me for this. Data is key to our decision making and to our projections. So we're always looking at what the pipeline of delivery is and the projected delivery dates. And the government are very wedded to annual targets and to the annual production of housing. So as you know, housing doesn't quite work that way. You can be delayed and construction can be delayed, which puts you from one year to the next. But this is the sort of infographics and data that we deliver. So you can see there, for example, and as I said, this is out of date. At the moment, we have over 8,000 units on site. We've 4,000 units awaiting to go on site. And we've, so you can see the breakdown there. And on the left-hand side, you can see all the different types of delivery streams, and they're all just billed. So we have the 4-stage process, the single-stage process, the capital assistance scheme operated by approved housing bodies. So you can see there the way we break down our figures. And we've also on the bottom right-hand corner there, projection and completion timelines across the sectors at a macro level. And I'll just flick through these very quickly, but you can see, you know, there's a large pipeline of projects there. And particularly for the next couple of years for delivery. But we're looking already at delivery in 2024 and 2025 and what needs to be done to keep those projects on track for delivery in those time periods. Graphic at the bottom is very interesting. It gives you an idea of the local authority, AHB, and the part 5, which is the private or the public element of private developments, what will be delivered and how they vary over the coming quarters. Again, this is new to us. We will be issuing these around the sector when we have the reports finalized. Again, we slice and dice the information whichever way people want it. And this is using Power BI, Microsoft product, which is free as far as I know. But as I say, we're very grateful to Eileen for her expertise in this and for generating these type of reports. You can see, for example, we have a bedroom analysis, which is an analysis of the different types of housing that's going to be delivered, whether 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed, etc., and when they're coming on stream and when they'll be delivered. Issues, what are the main issues affecting delivery? Where are the delays? And this is something that's it's still in test phase at the moment, and we're trying to work out how we classify that and report on it. So there, that's kind of a whistle stop tour, I suppose, column of housing delivery and the challenges that face us and the complexities around it. And I'll finish up there, column. And sorry, I'll just finish up by saying just thanks to my colleagues in the HDCO. We're a small team. We have 2 project managers, Walter Holden and Claude Lyons, who are on the technical side of things. And then we have 2 IT specialists, Eileen Davis and Shay Knox. And very fortunate to have such a brilliant team working with me in the HDCO. So thanks very much, Colin.